Everick on the line, she, her, from Oregon. Everick is a theist and is asking, is God bad for creating a world with so much suffering? Good question, Everick. Can you hear us okay?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
All right. What are your thoughts on that?
So recently, I have begun to question a lot more whether or not God is real, basically. And I was talking about it to one of my friends, and I said I don't think God could be like good for creating a world where like 10,000 kids starve each day. But they said their like rebuttal, which I didn't really think of any way to refute it, was that God made everyone with agency. If there wasn't the option for bad to be done, there'd be no way to determine, there'd be like, without bad, there wouldn't be any way for people to be good. If God intervened anytime someone decided they were going to rape someone, then there wouldn't be any like consequences. There wouldn't be good people.
So let me ask you this. How is that fair, and how does that make God good to the person who that happens to? Right? When people do say that a lot, that is a common argument you hear where, well, God allows bad things to happen because you need to be able to make the choice to do the good thing. That would, in my opinion, that would only hold weight if God only allowed bad things to happen to the person who chose to do bad things. So if I had a choice to be good or be bad and I chose bad, that would only make sense to me in my mind, and that would only still make God good for this in the sake of what we mean by good for this conversation, if only that person had bad things also happen to them. But at the point where, say, for example, you're a devout Christian and you get assaulted and you get robbed or your spouse dies, why is God good for allowing someone to do that to you when you haven't done anything wrong?
Why is God good for allowing something bad to happen to me when I didn't do anything wrong?
Right. Simply for the sake of the agency of the person who chose to do it to you.
Yeah. Isn't it because if God didn't allow for people to make bad choices, if there weren't any ramifications for bad choices, if choosing to stab someone didn't do anything, then there isn't the option to do that.
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe I should let me rephrase my question. Which would make God worse? Not allowing bad things to happen to anyone, or allowing bad things to happen to people who don't deserve it simply because the doer deserved the opportunity to do it?
Excellent question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think I want to say probably the former, but if God didn't, continuing that train of thought, if God did exist and made it and prevented bad things from happening to good people, then there wouldn't be, I don't think there'd be like a distinguishable like bad or good. And if there wasn't like a bad or good, then wouldn't there be just kind of like morally nothing? Wouldn't things not?
Well, if there was no bad, then everything would be good.
Right.
Yeah, right? But if everything's
So
good, then sorry.
So think of it this way. God created everything, and he created all the rules, and he created all the people and creatures and animals within it. So theoretically, if God wanted to, he could create a world where everything is going well, everything is perfect, everything is painless and cost-free and debt-free, and still give people the opportunity to follow him or not. He could create this perfect utopia and say, do you believe in me now? And still give people the right to say no. without rape, without murder, without robbery, without cancer, without illness, without the Holocaust, without any of these things happening. He could still create a world in which the things he claims to love so much are safe and secure and enjoying themselves, and they're not hungry, they're not starving, they're not thirsty, there's no disease, and still give you the opportunity to say, yes, I follow you, or no, I don't follow you. But instead, God's view of free will is allowing you, because you want to cause harm and death and tragedy to other human beings simply because you deserve the right to do it. Don't you think that a good God would choose the first version, where he makes it the most wonderful utopia you've ever experienced and still gives you the opportunity to choose whether or not you want to follow him and his teachings?
I do. However, this is kind of where the particular sect of Christianity I am, comes into play in regards to that question.
Okay.
Am I allowed to explain why?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I'm Mormon, and we believe that God sent everyone down to Earth as kind of a trial to let people experience life, to have the option to choose good or bad, and in the afterlife, the good people will go on. Good heaven is a bad way to explain it, but people will go on to the realm they deserve. All of the realms are good. Kind of, I'm simplifying a bit, but having the option to choose good or bad, determines where you go in the afterlife and what you do. It's not just do you believe in God or not? It's trying to make us good people.
Right. Sorry, Scott, continue.
I was just going to say, so you're saying that, are you saying that we need evil in the world? Is that what you're saying, that that's the best that God can do? I mean, can't God do anything? Can't God make a world with no evil? Even if we did have free will? I mean, the fact that somebody has free will means that they're free to do good things, right?
Yeah.
So why would somebody choose to do good things versus doing bad things? Because it's their nature? Because it's
do bad things?
Yeah. If somebody has freedom to do good things or bad things, why would they choose to do bad things? Would you say that it has to do with their personality and their nature and their, things about that person?
If you want to call this nature, you could. Self-benefit. People do bad things because it benefits themselves.
Well, let me ask you this question, back to your original question. Let's say that the Mormon faith is the correct form of faith and form of belief system, and what you believe is true, and that the better person you are and the more good decisions you make, the different levels of heaven you reach. And the different levels of heaven, while all are positive, there are more and more benefits the higher up that you get, depending on how good of a person you are. Let's say all of that is true. Does that make God a good God for making that the system? That's the question we're trying to answer, is less about whether or not that's true and more about, if that is the case, would you still call the person who developed that system that you have to follow good? My answer is no, because they have the opportunity to develop any system they want. And what they chose to do is develop a system that negatively impacts a lot of innocent people, simply for the sake of giving autonomy and free will to a few that decide to use it for evil and for bad. Do you think that even if that is the exact way things work, that makes God good?
No, but I think it would only be good if it's true that this system is the best way to accomplish it. If I couldn't think of any system that would permit people to become good and have a distinction between good and bad without bad things being able to happen.
Why do we need...
Does that make sense?
My question is, bad was invented by God in this scenario. Bad was something that God invented in order to give you the option to do good and do bad. If God didn't want murder to be a thing, it would not exist. If God didn't want sin to be a thing, it would not exist. So we are essentially rewarding someone who invented the bad. He invented the bad. He invented the good, and he always gets credit for inventing the good, but he rarely gets credit for inventing the bad. Rape would not exist if God did not want rape to exist. He controls that narrative. So is that a good God who, in a sense, does not need bad? If bad did not exist, we would not need to know the difference between good and bad, because it wouldn't matter, because we would be inherently good creatures or people. So is it a good God who says, in this existence where there's no such thing as rape and murder and sin and debauchery, I'm going to make it real when I don't have to, so that some people can choose not to do it, and that makes me happy, and other people choose to do it to innocent people who also want to make me happy, and at least I gave them free will against a thing that doesn't have to exist. They would not know they don't have free will if I did not make bad. But instead of creating a world where nobody knows they're missing out on bad, I'm going to create bad, and it's going to impact way more innocent people than guilty people, just in an effort to be able to say that I gave them free will. Is that a good God?
No.
I agree. I agree. And I think that's your original question was, is God bad for creating a world with so much suffering? And I think the short answer is, if God could have done otherwise, then yes, God is bad for making a world with so much suffering that was not necessary. Now, if you can show me that suffering is necessary, that's fine. However, if you say, well, we don't understand why so much suffering was necessary, well, that's fine. That might very well be the case. Maybe only a God could understand why that suffering was necessary. However, that means that I'm not in a position where I can justify believing that about the God. I'm not in a position where I can make that argument that God actually was doing something good. It might turn out that they were. If we're gonna go down that road, that God knows more about right and wrong than we do, then who's to say that everything that God does in the Bible is bad, but just we think it's good because we don't understand? I mean, once you cross that line of human beings don't understand what God understands, then everything goes out the window. And so we have to confine ourselves to human understanding if we want to have a discussion with other human beings. And where we're at with that is, yeah, God is bad. If God could have made a world without suffering, then yes, God is bad. What are your thoughts on that, Everett?
Yeah, I think and I hope I'm getting the name right, Sydney. I think what she said about if you created a system with no bad, there wouldn't need to be the distinction between bad and good. That's
right.
Or even if there was no bad in the world, we can still imagine what bad might be like. And I can imagine horrendous murders that have never happened. I mean, we have the facility to think up hypothetical situations. And so we can understand the difference between good and evil without evil staring us in the face. I mean, I don't see any thievery going on around me right now, but I can still imagine somebody stealing something. And so even if there was no evil in the world, we can still make a distinction between good and evil. We can still say, well, nobody does this, and maybe it's because nobody wants to murder. How about that? How about we just make people, they can freely do whatever they want. We just make them so they don't want to do it. I mean, that would be another alternative. But if the God has the ability to do otherwise, then yes, then they're evil.
That's the point, I think. That's most important, is when there is the option to function fully and happily and healthily without being introduced to evil, and it's completely doable, and you can still give people some sort of free will, and you choose instead to opt into horrible evil. That's where, in my opinion, you go from being a good God to not a good God.
I agree. That's a logical distinction.
Yeah. And I would also like to make the distinction that you can be a true believer in God and not think that God is inherently good. That's something else that I've talked to some theist friends of mine about, is you can think with your whole entire chest, you can believe that the rules in the Bible are right. This is what you have to do. This is how you have to live. And also that God is not inherently good. Those two things to some people can still be true.
Yeah, well, with that, I'm not sure where I say, because I call myself a theist right now, but I'm very unsure of the whole God real question.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a
Because
big question.
the only evidence I have is anecdotal, but and there's equal evidence for like all religions, and like the Bible and stuff, I don't really accept. I disagree with a lot of stuff. I am like, I'm transgender. That's pretty against a lot of Christianity. But doesn't. So anecdotal evidence is pretty bad evidence, but there's still evidence for. That's still evidence like for God across a bunch of different, like across the entire globe. Doesn't that kind of say something? If people across the entire globe have spiritual experiences.
No, it's a fallacy called the
so.
fallacy ad populum, right? It's our argumentum ad populum. You know, just because a lot of people believe something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There was a time when, you know, everybody thought that the trees and the rocks and the river all had spirits. There was a time when everybody believed the earth was flat. There was a time where everybody believed that the sun actually disappeared at night. I mean, there's lots of beliefs that we know that have been very popular in the past, but turned out to not be true. And so, you know, that's what leads us to that particular fallacy, is just because if a lot of people believe something, it's going to give me pause. If I don't believe it, it's going to make me want to investigate why that's the case. And I think that's perfectly valid. And I think that's in many ways, that's kind of where you're at now. And I want to, kudos to you for being able to examine your own beliefs in that respect. I mean, it's clear that you have some doubt in you, and that's fine. And getting people to examine their own beliefs is a hard first step to take for many people. And so you've made the hardest step already. Now, whether or not you end up concluding that there is a God or there's not a God, I feel better knowing that you've at least approached it with this amount of intellectual humility and willingness to self-reflect. I think that's an ability that's lost to the world, in large part to the world these days, is the ability to look at oneself. And so that's really awesome that you're able to do that.
And I also think as you go through this journey, this questioning journey, we would love to hear from you again. We would love to have you call back as you research and discover things and learn things and come to certain conclusions. We would love to have you call back, because this has been one of my favorite types of conversations, where we were just asking you questions and you were asking us questions, and we were both coming to different conclusions and giving different examples. And so hopefully, as you go through this journey, whether it leads you closer to God or further from God, we would love to have you call back and have more conversations like this, because it's so helpful to break down ideas, and other people can learn from your experience and your research as well. So thank you for calling. We'd love to have you call back sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to call back.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to have you, Everett.
So helpful in answering my question.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a great question.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Everett, thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate your call. And as Sydney said, definitely call back. I mean, one thing that I really like about Talk Heathen is our willingness and eagerness to continue longer term conversations. And so, we love it when people call back within reason. We love it when people call back and want to continue the conversations that we've had in the past. So really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, Everett, and we hope that you call back.